Imagine standing at the very edge of human history, not as an observer of ancient archives or distant cosmic memories, but as a living witness to a moment that bends everything we thought we understood about our universe. Picture yourself wrapped in the stillness of an ordinary night, unaware that in a single instant the sky would open a door it has kept sealed for all of human existence. Last night at precisely 11:47 p.m. UTC, something happened. It was not a faint radio whisper from the deep void. It was not a distant supernova silently blooming across the darkness of space. It was something close, something unmistakably deliberate, something powerful, measurable, and intelligent. And most astonishingly, every major observatory on Earth saw it at the exact same moment. From Mauna Kea to Chile's Atacama, from the European Southern Observatory to radio towers in Japan, instruments blared, alarms triggered, and seasoned scientists froze in disbelief, not because their machines detected noise, but because they detected meaning. In the first seconds, confusion dominated. Some believed it was a system malfunction, some thought it was a software glitch. But when multiple independent observatories began confirming identical readings, disbelief transformed into silence. Emails marked urgent flooded scientific networks. Emergency protocols were activated not because someone predicted danger but because no one could explain what was happening. The data was clear, it was structured, it was controlled. It was intentional. That is when the world silently crossed a line without knowing it would never go back. Scientific certainty collided directly with emotional disbelief. Screens showed numbers that should not exist. Infrared signatures, electromagnetic bursts, and directed energy emissions, all pointing to one conclusion no one was ready to accept. This was not a random cosmic tremor. This was something that behaved as if it knew it was being watched. In that moment, everything changed. The narrative of humanity shifted, not with a shout but with a silent acknowledgement. We are no longer alone. You are not just hearing about this event, you are now part of the story. So what exactly happened at 11:47 p.m. UTC that broke the known laws of physics? Within seconds of the event, the alerts began. Not from one observatory, not from one nation, but from dozens of the world's most sophisticated monitoring stations spread across nearly every continent. NASA's Deep Space Network in California flagged an anomaly at the exact same moment that ESA's tracking system in Darmstadt registered an identical spike. JAXA's Tanegashima Tracking Center reported unusual radiometric emissions, while the European Southern Observatory in Chile detected a dramatic deviation that made astronomers question whether their equipment had been compromised. At MIT's Haystack Observatory, senior researchers paused ongoing data analysis as their systems lit up with urgent thermal and electromagnetic alerts, matched precisely to UTC time, 11:47:23 p.m. A synchronized disturbance, so accurate that it triggered simultaneous timestamps across platforms that normally never align so perfectly. In those first chaotic minutes, disbelief was widespread. Scientists suspected a malfunction. Some believed it was a software synchronization error, perhaps a corrupted data stream caused by solar interference. Teams in India, China, and Russia all assumed their local systems were compromised. Yet as confirmations continued pouring in from Canada, Australia, South Africa, and even smaller independent observatories in Argentina and Finland, the truth became impossible to ignore. Every system, every facility, every instrument was registering the same readings. Atmospheric silence descended upon rooms normally filled with chatter, debates, and quiet academic confidence. Experts looked at their screens not with curiosity but with hesitation. They were looking at something that was not supposed to be possible. And then the world silently split into two groups: those who knew something extraordinary had occurred, and those who had no idea humanity had just crossed a historical threshold. Secure communication lines were activated. NASA established immediate priority communication channels with ESA, JAXA, and the Chinese National Space Administration. Russia initiated high-security, encrypted sharing through the Academy of Sciences. India activated cross-platform coordination with ISRO's network for space object tracking. For the first time since the Apollo era, institutions across previously divided political blocs began exchanging raw, sensitive data not for competition, but because the event defied competition entirely. It demanded understanding. For 14 continuous hours of non-stop consultation, specialist teams across MIT, Caltech, Oxford, Beijing Aeronautics Center, and the International Astronomical Union worked not to prove the readings were real, but to rule out every ought. Her possibility, yet every system, every test, every cross-verification led to the same unsettling truth: nothing was broken, nothing had malfunctioned. The universe had simply done something no one was prepared to accept. By dawn, rumors had already quietly leaked to private observatory networks and amateur astronomers. Without knowing what they were looking at, some had recorded unusual flashes, spike readings, and unexplained data bursts, posting fragments online. Within hours, deep space conspiracy theories, amateur simulations, and shaky leaked infrared visuals started circulating on social media. But the real data, the classified streams, remained confined to a handful of specialists who now understood one thing very clearly: this event was not random. The first anomaly wasn't movement, it was heat. The confirmation came not from motion but from heat. At exactly 11:47 p.m. UTC, sensors monitoring infrared emissions from the object known as 3I Atlas recorded a sudden spike, an inexplicable surge that multiplied its thermal output by a factor of 12 in less than 6 seconds. At first, Dr. Sarah Martinez at the Infrared Space Observatory believed it to be a calibration error, the sort of glitch occasionally caused by solar interference or faulty optics. But when the Spitzer Space Telescope independently registered the exact same increase, down to the millisecond, silence fell across the monitoring station. Within minutes, ground-based infrared arrays in Chile and Hawaii confirmed identical readings. The numbers were clear, precise, and utterly impossible to explain through any known natural process. Surface temperature readings showed that localized regions on 3I Atlas had rapidly climbed to 1,200 Kelvin hotter than molten aluminum. In cosmic terms, such temperatures normally indicate explosive outgassing, violent impact events, or shock heating from collisions. Yet none of these natural causes matched what was observed. This was controlled, precise, and sustained. Instead of a chaotic burst, the heat plateaued, held for nearly 14 minutes, and then dropped back to baseline as abruptly as it had appeared. Controlled heat emission of this kind is not simply rare in nature, it is unknown. Across multiple observatories, scientists began running models, desperately searching for any conceivable natural explanation. Could it be solar flare reflection? No, the wavelength signature was wrong. Could it be surface combustion or chemical exposure? Impossible, no natural object possessed the chemical composition to produce controlled thermal consistency across multiple wavelengths. The infrared signature was steady, uniform, and artificially contained. It behaved like energy generation. It behaved like machinery. The thermal distribution was particularly disturbing. There were distinct hotspots, evenly spaced across the surface, not spread randomly but arranged in a pattern. This is not how nature heats an object. Nature heats through chaos and scatter. This was deliberate, structured, organized. Radio telescopes in Australia and South Africa began picking up synchronized electromagnetic emissions directly linked to these hotspots, as if something was not merely heating, but activating. At 1,200 Kelvin, many metals begin to glow brightly in visible light due to black body radiation. Optical telescopes confirmed it. Some of the hotspots pulsed almost rhythmically as if part of a sequence. When those same pulses were detected in matching intervals by deep space radio listeners, the question was no longer whether this was natural. The question became what or who was responsible. Dr. Martinez later said, "I spent 20 minutes arguing with my own data trying to prove it wrong. But the data wasn't wrong, it was undeniable." When the European Southern Observatories (VLT) in Chile confirmed matching thermal readings using independent instrumentation, and when those readings perfectly aligned with radio bursts tracked from Hawaii, the last doubt vanished. This was not a malfunction, this was not a coincidence. Something on or within the object was generating energy in a structured, purposeful way. Scientists across institutions, disciplines, and continents silently understood the truth that no one wanted to say aloud: this was not nature, this was technology. The heat spike wasn't random, something was preparing to move. What happened next forced even the most skeptical scientists to abandon conventional explanations. 14 minutes after the sudden thermal activation, a measurable shift in the object's velocity was detected, first flagged by NASA's Deep Space Network, then independently verified by ESA's Tracking Center in Darmstadt, and finally confirmed by JAXA's orbital monitoring systems. The data was unmistakable. In just 14 minutes, 3I Atlas accelerated by 4.3 kilometers per second. That is 4,300 meters every single second, an astronomical delta V that violates everything we currently understand about natural ocean and space. To grasp the magnitude of that change, consider this. 3I Atlas is estimated to have a mass of 33 billion tons. According to standard physics, to accelerate an object of that mass by even a few meters per second would require enormous energy. But to accelerate it by 4.3 kilometers per second would demand an energy input so great that only one comparison seemed adequate, roughly equal to the total solar energy that strikes the entire Earth in one full day. That is the energy equivalent of more than 70,000 of the most powerful nuclear devices humanity has ever built, all detonated simultaneously. Yet the object did not explode. It did not fragment. It simply moved smoothly, deliberately, impossibly. Dr. Robert Chen, an orbital mechanics specialist at MIT, immediately began modeling what kind of propulsion system could produce such a change. Using known chemical propulsion formulas, he calculated that in order to achieve that acceleration, the object would need approximately 280 billion tons of chemical propellant, far more mass than the object itself. Even using theoretical ion propulsion operating at maximum efficiency, the energy requirements would exceed our current technological capabilities by orders of magnitude. Simply put, this maneuver could not have been achieved with any propulsion system known to humanity. And yet there it was, measured in real time, controlled thrust, sustained acceleration, and a precise shift in vector. There were no signs of fragmentation, no chaotic gas ejection, no signatures of impact. This was not a comet breaking apart or a natural volatile burst. This was thrust, intentional, directional, and meticulously sustained. What unsettled scientists even further was the manner of the maneuver itself. It wasn't abrupt or uncontrolled. It followed a smooth acceleration curve matched almost perfectly with what you would expect from a guided propulsion system. There were no signs of panic, no explosive accidents, no random deviations. This was not nature, it was navigation. As Dr. Chen stated bluntly during a briefing call, objects do not move like this unless something makes them move, and nothing in our current scientific knowledge can explain what made this move. This wasn't accidental, it was precise, controlled, and intelligent. The more the trajectory was analyzed, the less it resembled anything naturally occurring. Natural objects drift, wobble, tumble, and follow predictable gravitational paths shaped by celestial mechanics. They do not suddenly accelerate, correct their orientation, stabilize their spin, and then reorient along a precise and controlled vector. Yet that is exactly what was observed. Following the dramatic acceleration, 3I Atlas did not behave like a chaotic mass reacting to random forces. Instead, it settled into a stabilized orientation, showing no signs of tumbling. Its rotation slowed to a near-uniform axial alignment, as if being actively dampened or guided by some internal mechanism. Trajectory mapping from multiple space agencies revealed something even more extraordinary. The acceleration was not only deliberate, it was mathematically precise. The change in velocity showed deviation tolerances within micrometers, not kilometers. This level of precision is not the signature of chaotic gas release, nor is it the result of spontaneous gravitational interactions. This is control. Dr. Robert Chen at MIT summarized it clearly. You are not looking at an accident. You are looking at guidance. Whatever did this knew exactly where it wanted to go. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory ran further simulations to determine how the new course compared with previous orbital projections. Before the incident, 3I Atlas was on a trajectory that would bring it somewhat near the inner solar system, though still at a comfortable observational distance. After the maneuver, its projected path was no longer just close, it was deliberate. The angle of the new vector aligned with remarkable precision toward a single, unmistakable destination, the inner region of the Earth's orbital corridor. It wasn't drifting in our direction, it was adjusting itself toward our vicinity. Even more unsettling, multiple agencies reported that the energy emissions and velocity changes appeared to occur in sequenced bursts, almost like controlled thrust pulses rather than random expulsions. These bursts were evenly spaced, showing consistency in duration and output. Natural forces rarely display rhythmic precision. This did. Dr. Elaine Foster from Caltech phrased it with careful restraint. If this were a spacecraft, this is exactly how it would maneuver. When the full cross-agency analysis concluded, the findings were identical. It was not spinning randomly, not drifting, not being passively pushed by cosmic forces. It executed a controlled, stabilized, and intentional course adjustment confirmed across agencies, confirmed across continents, confirmed through mathematics. Then came the moment that changed everything. It turned toward Earth. Within hours of the maneuver, updated trajectory models began arriving from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, ESA's Near-Earth Object Coordination Center, the Chinese National Space Administration, Roscosmos, and the Indian Space Research Organization. All independent calculations, despite using different modeling frameworks, pointed to the same conclusion. The object's projected close approach to Earth had changed. Originally expected to pass at a safe distance on January 3, 2026, its arrival date had now shifted earlier, to December 28, 2025. And more concerningly, the minimum distance had decreased from 0.08 astronomical units to just 0.04. In more familiar terms, that meant it would now pass within roughly 15 times the distance between Earth and the Moon, an astronomical hair's breadth for something this massive. This change was not a minor deviation, it was a deliberate course correction. Observatories in Japan and Chile analyzed the vector realignment and concluded that the path was not only closer, it was cleaner, smoother, and more optimally aligned with Earth's orbital position during that window. This was not a blind gravitational drift, not an accidental slingshot effect. The corrected trajectory mirrored the kind of navigation an advanced probe would use to position itself within a specified proximity to a target, close enough to observe but not collide. Within a day, internal communications among major space agencies shifted from what caused the acceleration to a far more sobering question: why is it coming here? Public awareness spread quickly despite attempts to contain panic. Amateur astronomers posting orbital maps triggered viral discussions online. Headlines began circulating: object changes course toward Earth, mystery visitor accelerates toward inner solar system, scientists observe impossible propulsion event. News networks scrambled to invite experts, but few were willing to speculate publicly. The most experienced voices said little. Some refused to speak altogether. Governments began to go quiet. Press conferences were delayed. Scientific updates slowed. Words like classified, restricted, and secure replaced openness, sharing, and transparency. The public sensed the shift. Social media filled with speculation, denial, fear, and fascination. Late-night news programs called it the most significant astronomical event since the Apollo moon landing. Some called it the beginning of first contact. And yet, among those studying the data, one truth was becoming increasingly impossible to ignore. This object was not floating toward Earth, it was navigating, adjusting, choosing. But that was still not the most shocking discovery. First came the motion, then the precision, and finally the voice. Not a human voice, not even language as we know it, but something unmistakably structured, patterned, and deliberate, something that carried the defining signature of intention. Within hours of the object's trajectory shift, deep space listening stations began registering unusual radio emissions, not random bursts, not static, but organized signal structures. Radio telescopes across Australia, Spain, South Africa, and the United States all confirmed identical anomalous transmissions originating directly from 3I Atlas, spanning frequencies from 400 MHz up to 40 GHz. That range alone was unusual. Natural radio sources rarely emit across bandwidths that wide. What truly captured attention, however, was not the frequency range, but the unmistakable modulation patterns. Natural cosmic radio emissions are typically chaotic, noisy, and broad. These were none of those. These signals were clean, structured, displaying precise frequency shifts, rhythmically spaced intervals, and consistent repetition cycles. The modulation appeared as a carrier wave, embedded with repeated clusters of narrowband pulses punctuated by brief gaps, almost like a form of timing code. Astrophysicists and signal processing experts agreed. This wasn't background noise, it was ordered. It was intentional. But the signals did not stop at radio. Within the same 14-minute thermal activation period, optical telescopes began detecting vivid flashes of blue and green visible light radiating in sharp pulses. These were not random flares or sunlight reflections. They occurred with millisecond precision in fixed intervals, blinking in sequences like beacons or optical markers. Some observatories captured the exact intervals: 112 milliseconds on, 112 off, repeated 12 times, then a longer pause, and the cycle repeated. Ordinary light does not blink like that, not across multiple synchronized frequencies. This behavior was consistent with high-power laser signaling, something only produced through controlled emission, not by natural reflection or thermal radiation. Meanwhile, X-ray observatories, including NASA's Chandra Observatory and the Japanese MAXI instrument or the ISS, detected high-energy spikes from the same coordinates. These X-ray bursts displayed sharp spectral lines rather than broad continuous radiation. Such spectral precision typically indicates very specific atomic transitions, something seen in controlled particle beam activity or particle acceleration. Dr. David Hammond, a specialist in high-energy astrophysics at Oxford, stated, "This is not thermal radiation. This is targeted energy distribution. Something is accelerating charged particles intentionally." It was no longer possible to dismiss these signals as observational errors. The object was emitting across multiple regions of the electromagnetic spectrum: radio, visible light, infrared, and X-ray, with synchronized timing patterns and precise spectral signatures. Something was managing energy in a way that behaved like a communication system, or at minimum, an active technological process. For the first time, experts in 3 different fields, Electromagnetics, optics, and high-energy particle physics were analyzing data from the same object, reaching the same conclusion. This was active, controlled, and organized. The radio signals displayed modulation. The optical flashes displayed timing precision. The X-ray emissions displayed energy manipulation. No natural process behaves like this. The object was not just reacting, it was transmitting. It did not matter whether it was sending a message, identifying itself, or simply signaling activity. What mattered was that it was doing it intentionally, across wavelengths, across instruments, across time. A coordinated system was operating on or within 3I Atlas. And then inside those signals, we found a repeating pattern. What truly transformed the signals from intriguing to historic was not their frequency, their power, or even their precision, it was their meaning. Amid the radio emissions, optical flashes, and X-ray pulses, analysts began to notice something different. Something that did not resemble random energy output, propulsion residue, or sensor noise. It was not just structured, it was teaching. Across hundreds of hours of signal recordings, one pattern emerged consistently. Every 427 seconds, a sequence repeated. It began with a single powerful transmission fixed at exactly 1.42 GHz, precisely the hydrogen line, the universal frequency emitted by neutral hydrogen atoms throughout the cosmos. It is the one frequency astrophysicists worldwide have long agreed would be a logical choice for any civilization attempting to initiate interstellar communication. Hydrogen, after all, is the most abundant element in the universe. To begin communication, there is to begin with universality. The transmission did not convey images, voices, or language. Instead, it began with numbers simple, pure, and undeniable. First came the prime numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19. Each was encoded not in sound but in precise modulation pulses spaced by uniform time intervals. When researchers mapped the pulse lengths over time, they realized these were not random, they formed distinct numerical groupings. Next came the Fibonacci sequence 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, again encoded through modulation, spacing, and timing. It was as if whoever or whatever was generating the signal was saying, here is structure, here is logic, here is order. After the primer of basic mathematics, the next segment became even more sophisticated. Amplitude and pulse patterns began forming wave representations of pi, the golden ratio, and eventually geometric relationships. The signal was layering concepts, not just repeating facts. It was building toward language. Like a teacher, it was preparing the listener to understand. Dr. Sarah Chan, a mathematician and information theorist at Berkeley, was among the first to describe it in human terms. It is not speaking to us, she said. It is demonstrating how to learn to speak. Her team discovered that after several cycles of mathematical transmission, a new pattern began: symbols, not human symbols, logical symbols. The signal began assigning frequency bands to earlier mathematical concepts, creating a form of symbolic translation, a basic protocol. A universal glossary. The more it repeated, the clearer it became. The signal was not trying to impress, it was not trying to intimidate, it was trying to be understood. This was not noise, this was not accident, this was instruction. We were not just receiving energy, we were being introduced to intelligence. Humanity now split into two sides, curiosity and fear. As the signal decoding progressed, humanity's technological and political infrastructures were forced into rapid motion. Space agencies moved faster than ever before in modern history. Within just 72 hours of confirming that the transmission was structured and deliberate, the European Space Agency formally proposed an accelerated deep space intercept mission, bypassing the usual 5-year planning cycles. China announced its own parallel program, stating publicly that it could launch an intercept probe within 6 to 9 months using modified Long March launch systems. NASA, initially cautious, joined with a statement from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, indicating that a modified spacecraft, based on existing designs like New Horizons and OSIRIS-RX, could be adapted for a high-speed intercept trajectory. Russia, while declining to pursue an intercept mission, initiated its own strategy. The Russian Academy of Sciences activated an array of ground-based radio telescopes from Siberia to Crimea, merging their feeds to form a continental-scale interferometer capable of resolving fine patterns within the incoming signals. Their analysis quickly revealed multiple overlapping transmission layers, suggesting simultaneous communication channels, some broader, some tightly encoded. Unlike other nations, Russia did not speculate publicly. They released no interpretations, no guesses, only data. In New York, the United Nations declared the formation of an emergency advisory group, bringing together astrophysicists, signal analysts, diplomats, linguists, and experts in space law. For the first time, discussions included terms previously considered theoretical: extraterrestrial intelligence protocol, contact ethics, defensive preparedness, controlled disclosure. Governments quietly increased cybersecurity protections around space observatories, fearing that hostile nations might attempt to manipulate or conceal signal findings. Scientific collaboration was suddenly shadowed by strategic caution. But information could not be contained. Amateur astronomers tracking orbital changes using public data began piecing together fragments of the story. Social media platforms erupted with simulations, theorized contact dates, and videos claiming first message translations. News agencies seized on rumors, triggering headlines like, "Alien message decoded, is something coming to Earth?" and "NASA braces for contact." Fear started to spread, not because the threat was clear, but because it was not. Inside research centers, debates intensified. Should we respond? Should we remain silent? Should we attempt a rendezvous mission to meet it in space? Or should we retreat until we know more? Some argued we must reach it before it reached Earth's vicinity. Others warned that approaching something so advanced could be catastrophic. There were no answers, only urgency. What had begun as a scientific discovery was quickly becoming a species-wide philosophical dilemma. But beneath all those decisions lies a deeper question. For centuries, humanity looked to the sky not expecting an answer but seeking wonder. We studied the stars through telescopes and equations, not because we believed someone might be looking back, but because in their silence we found meaning. Now that silence is gone. The universe has spoken, and with it our most deeply held assumptions are being quietly rewritten. The question is no longer whether we are alone. The question is what it means that we never were. Every belief system, every philosophy, every framework for understanding existence is now under subtle, silent transformation. Some ask whether this confirms ancient intuition, that intelligence is not exclusive to humankind, that awareness may be woven into the fabric of the cosmos. Others ask whether such knowledge destabilizes the very foundation of how we define ourselves, our history, our origins, our purpose. Faith is not threatened by the possibility of other minds. But identity might be. Do they see us as learners, curious, evolving, slowly reaching upward with fragile tools and ambitious dreams? Or do they see a species still divided, still uncertain of its future, still struggling to coexist even with itself? Are we interesting to them? Are we ready for them? Do they approach us because they believe we can understand, or because they know that soon we must? And perhaps the most quietly profound question is not what they know about us, but what we will now have to know about ourselves. For if intelligence beyond our own exists, then humanity is no longer the reference point for understanding mind, purpose, or possibility. We are now one of many. Civilization has been shaped by stories we tell ourselves about what is possible. Last night, possibility changed. We're standing at the dawn of cosmic conversation, not as silent observers of a distant mystery, but as acknowledged participants in something unfolding right now. The event that began at 11:47 p.m. UTC was not the end of certainty, it was the beginning of awareness. The sky did not send a warning, it did not send a threat, it sent a signal, a presence, a pattern, a question, and now humanity must decide how to answer. This is not the end of our world, it is the end of how we believed the world worked. Our maps of the heavens will now include more than stars, planets, comets, and dust. They will also include intention, our concept of intelligence will no longer be confined to biology or Earth or history. Consciousness, as we now know, may exist wherever the laws of reality allow it to flourish. Hope, fear, and wonder now coexist in equal measure. We are not ready, yet we are no longer uninvited. Something saw us, calculated its path, and chose to be seen. Whether it seeks to teach, to watch, or simply to be known, we cannot yet say. But it did not hide, it did not disguise itself, it arrived with clarity, patience, and precision. Perhaps we have not been discovered, perhaps quietly we have just been welcomed. Don't stop here, let's decode the message together.